He did not wait until morning. He made the decision the moment the midwife came out of the hut and told him it was another girl, the 7th. 7 daughters and not one son, and in the village of Obara, where a man's worth was measured by the sons who would carry his name, Emeka Okafor had run out of patience and run out of excuses and run out of whatever small piece of grace he had been holding on to for the last 12 years of marriage. He told his wife Adaeze to leave before the sun came up. Not in a week, not after she recovered, before the sun came up. She was still bleeding. She wrapped the baby in the cloth she had brought to the birthing hut. She looked at her husband the way you look at someone you have spent 12 years trying to understand, and have finally, in one terrible moment, understood completely. She did not beg. She did not cry. She picked up her daughter and she walked out of the compound, and she did not look back. And the village of Obara watched and said nothing. Now, before we go any further, I need you to understand something about Emeka Okafor. He was not a cruel man by nature. He was not a violent man. He was not the kind of man who shouted or threatened or used his hands wrong. He was something more common and more dangerous than any of those things. He was a man who had decided what mattered and had arranged the world around that decision and could not see anything that did not fit inside it. Sons mattered. Sons carried the name. Sons built the compound. Sons buried you properly when your time came. That was what his father had told him. That was what his father's father had told his father. That was the only story Obara knew how to tell about manhood and legacy and what a life was worth. And Emeka had believed it so completely and for so long that when the truth came for him, he did not recognize it. He thought it was just another daughter. Adaeze walked to her mother's village. It took 2 days. She carried the baby on her back and she walked through the bush and across the dry river bed and up the hill to the compound where she had been born. And her mother met her at the gate and asked no questions and made no judgments, and simply brought her inside and fed her and let her sleep. That was the last kindness anyone showed Adaeze for a very long time. Because survival was not kindness. Survival was work. She farmed, she traded, she learned to dry and preserve food in ways that the market women in the next town had never seen. She taught her daughters everything she knew and then went looking for what she did not know and learned that too. She sent her eldest daughter to the mission school when she was 6 years old and walked the 3 miles with her every morning and picked her up every evening, and did this for 8 years without missing a single day. She had 7 daughters and she raised every one of them like the world owed them nothing, and they were going to take what they needed anyway. Back in Obara, Emeka Okafor found a new wife within the year. The village approved. A man needed sons. That was simply how things were. His new wife, a young woman named Obiageli, gave him 3 sons in 5 years. The village celebrated each one. Emeka walked taller. He expanded his compound. He put his eldest son's name on the gate. He did not think about Adaeze. He did not think about the 7 daughters he had sent away in the dark. He told himself they were provided for, somewhere, by someone. That was enough. It was not enough, but he had arranged the world around his decision, and his decision did not have room for doubt. Here is where I need to ask you something. Have you ever watched someone build their entire life around one belief and refuse to see the cracks forming? Have you ever known the ending before the person living it had any idea it was coming? Because the village of Obara knew, the older women knew, the ones who had seen this story before in their mother's time and their grandmother's time, the ones who knew that the universe has a particular sense of humor about men who confuse noise with strength. They knew. They just waited. The first son's name was Chukwuemeka. He was 23 when he came home from the city, having spent everything his father had given him for education on things his father would never have approved of. He came home with debts and with a story that changed every time he told it. Emeka paid the debts. He told himself it was a young man's mistake. Every young man made mistakes. The second son's name was Nnamdi. He was 20 when he was brought home from the next village by men his father had never met, men who spoke quietly and whose eyes said things their mouths were too polite to say. Nnamdi had done something. Emeka never learned exactly what. He paid what was asked. He told himself the boy was learning. The third son's name was Ikena. He was 17 when the thing with the chief's daughter happened. That story spread through Obara in 3 days. Emeka could not pay that one away. He could not explain it away. He sat in his compound and he heard the story coming back to him from every direction, and for the first time in 20 years, he did not know what to say. His wife Obiageli came to him one evening and sat across from him and spoke to him the way women speak to men when they have been patient for a very long time and have finally run out of patience. She said, "Emeka, I have given you 3 sons. I have done what I was brought here to do. But I am watching these boys and I am watching you, and I am going to tell you something that nobody else in this compound has the courage to say." She said, "A son is not a legacy. A son is a person, and a person becomes what they are taught to be. And these boys were taught that they were owed everything and responsible for nothing, and that the world would arrange itself around their comfort the way you arranged this compound around your name." She said, "You threw away 7 daughters for 3 sons, and the daughters learned to build, and the sons learned to take. And now you are living in what you built, and I do not know if you can see it yet, but I can." Emeka did not answer her, but that night he did not sleep. The letter came on a Thursday. It was written by hand on good paper, and it came from the regional capital, and it bore the letterhead of a company Emeka had never heard of. He took it to the school teacher to read because his eyes were not what they were, and the words were formal, and he wanted to be sure he understood them correctly. The school teacher read it once, then he read it again. Then he looked at Emeka over the top of the paper with an expression Emeka could not quite read. The letter was from a company called Adaeze and Daughters Limited. They were a food preservation and distribution company established 14 years ago in the regional capital. They had recently acquired land in 3 surrounding villages for their expansion of operations. One of those villages was Obara. The land they had acquired included the eastern field that Emeka's family had farmed for 3 generations. The letter was informing him of the acquisition and inviting him to a meeting at the offices in the capital to discuss the terms of the transition. The letter was signed by the managing director. Her name was Emeka Okafor, his eldest daughter, the one born first, the one whose name he had never spoken aloud after the night he sent his mother away. I want you to stay with what just happened in this story for a moment, because this is not about revenge. I need you to understand that. This is not about a daughter who spent her whole life planning to buy her father's land to punish him. Chidinma was not thinking about Emeka Okafor when she built her company. She was thinking about her mother, who walked through the bush for 2 days with a newborn on her back. She was thinking about the mission school and the 3-mile walk every morning. She was thinking about the things her mother taught her about preservation and patience and what it means to build something that lasts. Emeka happened to be in the way of what she built. That is the difference between revenge and consequence. Revenge is a plan. Consequence is just the world being accurate. Emeka Okafor went to the capital. He sat in a waiting room with chairs that cost more than anything in his compound, and he looked at the women moving through the office, and he slowly understood that every one of them was his daughter or his daughter's employee. He recognized Ngozi's walk. He recognized Amara's eyes. He recognized the way the youngest one, the one born the night he made his decision, laughed at something across the room. A laugh that sounded exactly like Adaeze's laugh had sounded 30 years ago, when she still had reasons to laugh. He sat there for a long time. Then Chidima came out. She was 41 years old. She wore a suit the color of deep green, and she walked through that office the way her mother had walked out of the compound 31 years ago. Not performing anything for anyone, just completely certain of where she was going. She sat across from him. She placed a document on the table between them. She said, "The terms of the acquisition are in this document. They are fair. You will be compensated at market rate for the land and offered a 5-year lease on the farmable portion for continued use. You do not have to sign today, but I would appreciate a decision within 30 days. She said all of this calmly, professionally, the way you speak to someone you have business with. Emeka looked at his daughter, at the woman his daughter had become, at the office she had built and the company she ran and the sisters who moved through it like they had always belonged somewhere this certain. He said, "Chidima." She looked at him. He said, "I would like to speak to your mother." Chidima was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "She is in the next room. I will ask her if she wants to see you." She stood. She straightened her jacket. She walked to the door. She stopped. She said without turning around, "We did not build this for you. I need you to know that. We did not build this because of you or despite you. We built this because my mother decided the morning she left your compound that the world was going to have to make room for her daughters. And the world did." She opened the door and went through it. Emeka sat alone in the room with the document and the quiet and 31 years of a decision he had made before the sun came up. He did not sign the document that day. He sat there until Adaeze came in. She was 63 years old. Her hair was gray, and her hands were the hands of someone who had worked every day of their life. And she sat across from him with the same expression she had worn the night she left. Not angry, not triumphant, just completely, finally arrived somewhere she had always been walking toward. They talked for 2 hours. Nobody in the office knew exactly what was said, but when Emeka left that afternoon, he signed the document at the door and he handed it to the youngest daughter, the 7th one, the one born the night he made his decision. And he looked at her for the first time in her life and he said, "Your name is beautiful." She looked at him the way young women look at old men who have taken too long to say the right thing. She took the document. She said, "I know." Emeka Okafor went home to Obara. His 3 sons were there. The compound was smaller than it used to feel. The name on the gate was still his, but something about it looked different now. Or maybe he was looking at it differently. He was not sure. He sat in the compound that evening and thought about what legacy actually meant. Not the word, not the way his father had used it. What it actually was. Whether it was the name on the gate, or the thing you built, or the people you shaped, or the love you gave, or the love you withheld, and what the difference between those 2 things cost. He thought about Adaeze walking through the bush for 2 days with a newborn on her back. He thought about 7 daughters who learned to build because nobody was going to build it for them. He thought about 3 sons who had been told the world already belonged to them and had behaved accordingly. He sat there until the sun went down, and for the first time in 31 years, Emeka Okafor was not certain he knew what a man was supposed to be. That uncertainty, the elders say, is where wisdom begins. It is a shame, they also say, that it so often arrives so late. If this story found something in you today, I want you to share it with one person. You already know who that person is. Drop a comment below. Tell me this. At what point in this story did you feel the shift coming? Was it the letter? Was it Chidima walking into the room? Or was it the youngest daughter and the last two words of this story? I read every single comment. If you are new here, welcome to Afro Tale Vault. We tell stories like this every week. African stories, stories about consequence and dignity and the things we build and the things we lose, and what happens when the world finally has to agree with the truth. Subscribe and turn on notifications. New story tomorrow. You do not want to miss it.